Before there were streets, before hotels, schools, and electric lights, before Greenwood became a city, this place was quiet.
In 1893, the future townsite of Greenwood was still wilderness. No buildings, no businesses, no real roads. Just forest, creek bottoms, and a single narrow trail winding its way towards scattered mining camps beginning to stir in the boundary country.
At the heart of it all stood just two small cabins on land known as Dillier's Ranch. Welcome back to Tracks, Trails, and Forgotten Tales, where we talk about lost places, hidden trails, and real stories. We're your hosts. I'm Dan.
And I'm Carm.
And today we're diving into the story of Greenwood, British Columbia, Canada's smallest incorporated city.
Yeah, and it has such an amazing history. And we're going to take you back all the way to the beginning, going back to 1893, when the area was actually known as Dillier's Ranch. Mm-hmm. In 1893, Otto Dillier acquired several hundred acres of land on that area and built himself a modest cabin. For the next 2 years, almost nothing changed. There was a small trail that passed through his land because, of course, this time there were starting to be mining camps in that area. Mm-hmm. So prospectors and pack trains were moving between the newly forming mining camps. There were no streets, no town plan, just a sense that maybe something might come someday. And no one could have known just how quickly that someday would arrive.
So 2 short years later, in 1895, Robert Wood showed up into the boundary region with his nephew. Now, Wood, he wasn't new to frontiers. He actually was born in the Walpole Township in Ontario in 1841. And like many men of his generation, he felt the pull of opportunity far from home. So in the spring of 1862, he headed west, drawn by the excitement of the Cariboo Gold Rush. Now, mining, however, did not bring him the success he'd hoped for. Yeah. So like anybody else, if something doesn't work, you have to adapt. So he turned to farming. And to do that, he actually moved to New Westminster.
Yeah.
And later moved to the Okanagan, opening a business in Lansdowne, yeah.
Lansdowne.
I've never heard of Lansdowne.
Because it no longer exists in the Okanagan, that's why.
Now, when that business was destroyed by fire, so he rebuilt. Mm-hmm. And, he succeeded. Eventually, he settled in Armstrong, and where he became a very respected merchant.
Yeah.
So by the time Wood arrived in the boundary in 1895, he learned an important lesson. If you couldn't strike a rich in the ground, you could still build something lasting around it.
Now, and that's exactly what Robert Wood did. When he visited the boundary country with his nephew, he was really impressed, not just by the mineral wealth, and I mean, there's lots of copper, lots of gold for those of you that know all the mining history in this area, but by the location. Now, mining camps at this time were growing really rapidly in this region and in every direction. And this land sat so central to them all. And Wood saw what others hadn't yet. So in September of 1895, he purchased Dillier's Ranch and just convinced that it was the perfect location for a future town site. Once he made that decision, man, did he move fast.
Yeah, so before returning to Armstrong to finalize his affairs and gather his family, Wood had hired crews to set development in motion. So he had men put to work. They were excavating foundations and hewing logs for buildings, clearing brush, and laying out roads. So if you don't know what hewing is actually a really cool thing they used to do back in the day, because obviously sawmills were not abundant in that area yet. Now, hand-hewn logs, they take the log, they cut it down, and take an axe, and they use an axe, and they make that square for the houses.
Yeah, I love those buildings. Every time we walk in, you want to take pictures of them. It's pretty amazing.
I love hand-hewn logs. They're so pretty.
But, most importantly, Robert Wood personally financed the construction of wagon roads connecting Greenwood to the neighboring mining camps. Now, the first road was up to Deadwood and Copper camps, And then the road to Greenwood Camp was built a short time later. Now, Greenwood Camp, if you haven't watched our last two videos, that's actually what became Phoenix, British Columbia. So, personally financing these roads is not cheap. It was said to be the one up to Phoenix, $3,000, and that's a lot of money in 1895. But this wasn't generosity. This was strategy. The nearby settlement of Anaconda which is barely a mile away. I mean, it's now part of Greenwood, had a slight head start. And Wood knew that if he had waited for the government to build the roads, he would lose control of where they went. This was his decision to build the roads. So by building them himself and ensuring that they originated and went through Greenwood, he secured the advantage. Where the roads went, people are going to follow.
Like the old saying, if you build it, they will come.
Yes, right?
And they did.
They did.
Absolutely. So the first permanent residents, they obviously soon followed. Now, Mr. and Mrs. Sutherland and Mr. and Mrs.
Shawnquist, I believe that's how it's pronounced.
Erected the first 2 log cabins in Greenwood. Now, before then, everybody lived in tents. Now, this is the moment when Greenwood stopped being a camp and started becoming the community. Now, in November of 1895, Robert Wood returned with his family, ready to live in the town he had just begun to imagine months earlier.
Yeah, and then that same month that Robert Wood came back, now remember that when he left to go gather his family, he already had crews put to work. So that same month, Greenwood's very first business opened. It was a small log building, and it was a tin shop and a general store owned by Robert Wood and Ralph Smales, who was originated from Vernon. Now, while the Woods family's home was under construction at this time, they actually lived in a small room that was partitioned off inside the tiny store itself.
So in December of 1895, the construction began on Greenwood's first hotel, the Pioneer. Now, it was a partnership between Frank Wood, a man named Hubble, to which we don't know his first name because we can't find any recorded history of it anywhere, unfortunately.
I tried.
And Robert Westall. So building materials were very expensive back then. The nearest sawmill, the nearest sawmill was in Midway, and lumber at that time cost $25 per 1,000 board feet. Now that was a steep price for a town that really barely existed, but still they pressed on and they made it work. So on December 31st, 1895, a special dinner was held to celebrate the opening of the small primitive hotel. Now I'm going to tell you what that dinner was. Weird. It consisted of turkey and oysters.
Yeah.
Turkey and oysters.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
No. And it's funny because a year later, the Boundary Creek Times published a story and did a description of this event. And let's just say it was less than flattering. And then on March 2nd, and this is so close together, these timelines, but on March 2nd, 1896, Wood, Hubble, and Westall announced that they were going to do a major expansion on the Pioneer Hotel very shortly after it opened. And the Pioneer now occupied lot 22 alongside the original building lot number 21 on Block 5 and Government Street. And the new hotel was now measured 40 to 60 feet, 40 by 60 feet. And it now included 9 bedrooms, a dining room, a sitting room, an office, and a first-class livery stable.
Fancy.
Right? And then the original hotel had become the bar room.
Nice.
Yeah. And then ownership changed quickly, as it often did in boomtowns. Shortly after, by July, Hubble sold his interest in the hotel. A month later, Westall followed and sold his interest. Eventually, the ownership had passed multiple hands.
That's crazy how many people it went through in this short time.
So there was it included Frank Wood, John Nelson, J.J. Caulfield, and later Nelson and Tynan, until it finally settled with John and Susie Nelson in November of 1897. Changed all of those hands within a year.
Yeah, that's really crazy.
Right?
I wish we had numbers on how much they were selling it for at that point.
And maybe you can find it somewhere. We can find some of the old newspaper clippings. If anybody has those, please share.
Yeah,
We'd love
we'd
to
love
see
to
them.
know.
But
So in February of 1896, the Greenwood sawmill opened up. Now, it employed 25 people and it produced about 15,000 board feet of wood per day, which is really good. So because they were producing their own wood, they wouldn't have to bring wood in from the Midway sawmill, and the buildings went up a lot faster.
yeah, and just think about this. This is February of 1896. Now, the first permanent residents arrived in basically the fall of winter of 1895. So this is just a few short months later. They have a store, they now have a mill, they have a hotel, and they were growing because on April 8th, 1886, Greenwood welcomed its first baby, which was Edward Christensen. Now, Edward's parents were Mark and Anna Christensen, and they were among Greenwood's pioneer families. And they were one of the first, or the first, to actually arrive even before Robert Wood did. So they had, back in August of 1895, even though the road officially ended at Boundary Falls. So at this time, there's the wagon road to Boundary Falls. Past Boundary Falls was just a pack trail that was used, suitable for maybe a horse, right? But they simply looked at each other and they said, we'll go farther. And they sure did. And, the city of Greenwood, because he was the first baby, it wasn't even a city, but later on, they did offer Edward and promised him a city lot as a symbol of Greenwood's future. Unfortunately, Edward never received it. Edward was killed in France during World War I on August 13th, 1917. His name now appears on Greenwood's First World War memorial. Mark and Anna, his parents, they had 9 children altogether, including Edward, and they remained in the area, Mark and Anna, for the rest of their lives. And they're now buried in the Greenwood next to their daughter, Mary. But there's so many families like theirs and so many stories that are still untold. And I do want to thank, one of their descendants actually that commented on one of my Facebook posts that it was his great uncle that was the first baby born in Greenwood and shared his picture with me. And so thank you so much. We love seeing your stories and your history and your heritage of the places that we talk about. It just brings all these things to life. And I did get a lot of the story, though, too, from the book that we bought at the Greenwood Museum about the pioneer families of Greenwood and Midway, which is fantastic. I'll put we'll throw a picture of it up on the screen for you of the book that I'm talking about. But thank you so much for that. But there are so many stories and so many pioneers of Greenwood that shaped that town.
So by April of 1896, Greenwood had around 40 buildings, either completed or near completion. Now, among them, they had 2 assay offices. One was run by the Guest brothers, and the other by Barrett and Hodgson. They had a laundry, which was run by Smith and Straight. Dinsmore's Bakery, the Cafe Royale restaurant, the Fashion Livery and Feed, mining engineers, real estate offices, carpenters, and even plans for an opera house, which kind of cool. They had one. Every town had an opera house back then. So, I mean, this was no longer an outpost. This was actually a full-blown town.
Yeah, and then shortly after, May 1st, 1886, Greenwood's second hotel opened, and that was the Windsor. Now, construction of the Windsor was quite slow when proprietors George Seymour and Sam Webb, arrived in Greenwood. They realized that lumber was actually quite scarce, and carpenters were all busy elsewhere on other projects. So the Times actually reported in their newspaper that, and this is what they said, and I'm just going to read it. Consequently, the building of the hotel was a slow process. Then there had been very little lumber to be had. It was found necessary to purchase a team of horses and a wagon before the furniture could be brought from Marcus. And to put a climax on their misfortune, a load of glass and china went over a bluff on the road. Can you imagine? Like, it
That
just
would really suck.
Yeah, they're not the greatest luck. But to make matters worse, their liquor license wasn't obtained until 2 months after they opened. They didn't get it until July 1st.
I'm sure they were still serving liquor, though.
Yeah, maybe. Yes. But I mean, boom towns were never easy. Not that we would know firsthand.
Mhm.
But and obviously the city was growing quite rapidly. And then by the end of May, Greenwood's third hotel opened, which was the International, and its owner was O.F. Mickle.
Mhm. Throughout 1896, Greenwood continued to expand. So the Miller brothers, they started a watchmaking and jewelry store. And W.D. Patton opened a furniture store. And that was just to name a couple. Now, on September 12th, 1896, the first issue of the Boundary Creek Times was published. Greenwood had a voice.
Yeah, every town needs at least one newspaper, and
Yeah.
that's really exciting, which is why some of those stories that we told before, they weren't published until a year after it actually happened. But, and then just days earlier in September, on September 9th, Greenwood's first teacher arrived. And this was Miss Grace Thorber, and she arrived by stagecoach from Penticton.
Mhm.
Now, and classes at the time were being held at first in a public building while the schoolhouse was being constructed. The construction of the schoolhouse began on September 26th, and the schoolhouse was a 1.5-story building with the living quarters upstairs in the half and a front porch. However, Miss Thorber fell ill that winter, and on December 6th, 1886, she passed away at the home of Ralph Smales. She was just 19 years old. And,
Sad.
I'm not even sure. I tried to find out if she ever even got to teach and move into the new schoolhouse.
In those 4 short months, it's hard to say, right?
How fast it was constructed. But
Mhm.
just so sad, and just 19. So many stories like that, too, of tragedy.
So still in 1896, we're in September. Greenwood opened his first hospital, as everybody needs a hospital. Now, the Boundary Creek Times described it, and I'm going to read this as a quote, perhaps the most pretentious building yet erected in the county between Vernon and Rossland. That's quite a thing, pretentious.
Pretentious for a hospital. And
Wow.
I mean, I guess it stood on kind of the side of the hill,
Mhm.
overlooking the growing town of Greenwood, and
Castle on the hill?
yeah, I guess so.
Actually, it was pretty big. It stood 3 stories tall. It was painted red and had gold trim, which may be why they called it pretentious, because of the
Maybe.
gold trim. Who knows? But inside, they had wards for men and women, unlimited hot and cold water.
Pretentious.
Fancy stuff. A morgue, laundry, a furnace system, private quarters, and a water system that was housed on the top floor.
Yeah, and it was Dr. Jakes that was the doctor in Greenwood, and he moved his family from Boundary Falls, and they set up residence in the new hospital,
Mhm.
which is why they had the living quarters. Now, he had a private salon or seating area on the main floor, and then upstairs on the second floor was where they had like his wife and children and their main living quarters.
Mhm.
But it was, however, shortly after, just again 2 short months later, in November, a fire nearly destroyed it. Now, thanks to the volunteer fire brigade at the time, the hospital survived with only damage to the roof and some furniture. Now, I read there was about $1,000 damage to the roof and about $500 worth of furniture that was damaged.
Pretty significant still.
Still significant, especially when you lose your roof
Mhm.
going into winter in that area.
Yeah, no kidding.
However, by mid-December, all of the damage had been repaired. So that was good.
Fast.
Yeah, very fast. I wish things happened that fast these days.
Yeah, right. So by December of 1896, nearly 300 town lots have been sold, which amazing. There are almost 50 business buildings. And to imagine just 1 year earlier, 1 year, there had only been 2 cabins and a few tents. That's insane growth.
Insane. Things like these days do not happen that fast.
No.
You're lucky if a building goes up in 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Right? So that's crazy.
Yeah, no kidding. So by 1897, Greenwood had finally put in electric streetlights. That was in front of the Pioneer and Windsor hotels. There was a telephone line between Taylor's drugstore and the hospital. There was soda factories. Its first private bank, which was Bealey Investment Company. They had some sports teams and social clubs and dreams of breweries, as one had not been built yet.
And then on July 12th, 1897, Greenwood was officially incorporated as a city. And with that came elections, railways, and even bigger ambitions. But that is a story for next week.
Yeah, thank you for joining us for this first installment of our stories on Greenwood, British Columbia. We hope you can join us next week for the second installment as we move into the incorporation of Greenwood.
Yeah, the early 1900s. It's really big boom years. So we look forward to you joining us then. Until then, cheers.
See you, everybody.